Welcome to the Friends with Money podcast, brought to you by Money Magazine, creating financial freedom for Australians since 1999.
Hello and thanks for joining us for another episode of Friends with Money, Money Magazine's podcast to help you earn, save and achieve your financial goals. My name is Tom Watson, a senior journalist here at Money Magazine, and as always, it is a pleasure to be with you. Let's face it, for many Australians, superannuation is often cast into the let's worry about it later pile of life admin. It tends to get the same treatment as assignments at school and uni did. Sure, it's there, but is it really worth much thought until the very last moment? The thing is, and I'm sure some listeners will fully agree with me, I always did better on my assignments when I started earlier, rare as that was, when I put a little bit of legwork in along the way. And as I'm sure we'll get into today, the same can be true for super, where a little bit of curiosity might just pay off over the long run. Right, enough blathering. It is time to introduce today's guest, and I'm very pleased to say that joining us today on the podcast is Chief Retirement Officer at Team Super, Sarah Forman. Sarah, welcome to Friends with Money.
Thanks, Tom. Great to be here today, and a great topic to talk about, helping people, nudging them to be a little bit more curious about their superannuation.
Well, Sarah, I want to dive right in today. So to start us off, how can people, as you said, be a little bit more curious when it comes to their superannuation? And I guess in your opinion, why should they be as well?
Yeah, look, for many people, their superannuation is likely to be either their biggest asset across their lifetime or their second biggest after a property. So it's really important to be connected with it. There's three simple things that I would probably recommend every Australian with superannuation should know. And the first of those is where your super is, who's managing that money for you, how many accounts that you have, and what sort of fees are you paying for that fund. And while that seems really basic, if you started there, you're probably already in a better spot than millions of Australians who are sitting with unclaimed money today linked to their superannuation savings. And that money, I think in 2024, there was around $17 billion in lost superannuation that was being held by super funds because they've lost contact with the member, or it's sitting with the ATO. And you could do a search through the MyGov app if you've linked the ATO to your MyGov app to see if you are one of those millions of Australians with some unclaimed super.
I almost want to stop the recording right now to go and have a look. You've piqued my interest, Sarah, but it'll have to wait until we're over and I'll go have a look. But listeners, do it now, or maybe listen to the podcast and then go do it, actually.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, moving on a little bit, what are some of the factors that are likely to have, I guess, the biggest impact on people's super then?
Look, it's interesting. The way super is designed is to make sure that it's a safe place for all those people that are quite disconnected with their super. So if you were to do nothing, your super will just roll on as it's designed, and your employer will make contributions. Those will be added to your balance. And even in many products, your fund over your lifetime will make some life stage adjustments to how it's invested to ensure that it's getting de-risked as you get closer to retirement. And we've just been through some volatile times in markets. And for many people, as you're closer to retirement age, you don't really want to be invested in some of the asset classes that are highly volatile if you don't think you've got a really long timeline for markets to recover. So your super fund and many super funds will likely, where you're not actively engaging with your super, they will be adjusting how your super is invested over your life stage. But there are implications to things like insurance if you take a do-nothing approach. Many super funds provide a level of automatic cover for things like total permanent disability, and you pay for that insurance through your super. And for many, you default into that cover when you join the plan. Everyone's needs for insurance will change over their lifetime based on their financial needs. So understanding what cover you're paying for and checking if you have other policies outside of super through your employer will also help ensure that you're not doubling up, as that may cost your super balance. Accessing insurance through super can be really cost-effective way for you to future-proof your future and ensure that you will have income in the event that you stop working due to an illness or some form of injury. But making sure you know about what insurance you're paying for is important because there's many instances where that is reducing your super balance.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Sarah. That's it's a process I've literally just gone through in the last couple of months. I decided, to opt out of super insurance in my super in my 20s, but now that I'm in my 30s and life has changed, I decided that I definitely need to get back in. And I got to say, I found the process a lot more simple than I thought it was going to be. And my fund was very helpful in terms of guiding me through that. So yes, something important maybe for other people to think about as well. You've given us one very practical tip already, which is to go and check to see if we have any unclaimed super. But tell us, Sarah, what are some of the, I guess, other immediate steps that people can take in order to build a better understanding of their superannuation?
Yeah, look, most super funds are ready and willing to help guide and educate members on their super and the role it can play in their financial future. They will help translate some of the common technical language that is a real barrier to people connecting with their super. I think we all struggle with the term non-concessional contribution caps and trying to understand what that really means. And by the way, it just references the level of super you can contribute from your pre-tax salary. Once you've nailed down sort of those basic three things I referenced earlier, you can really start to turn your attention to some of the ways you can maximize your super. Making extra contributions by whatever means makes sense to you is a great way to take extra control over your financial future. And over time, the impact of that can be quite material. And so you can be contributing from your pre-tax salary within certain caps, or once you've been paid and you've lived out the month and you feel you've got a little buffer, you could contribute out of your after-tax salary as well. And the compounding benefits of that can be quite significant over time. Compounding meaning that year on year, having that money invested in the growth it will achieve each year and builds on itself can be quite impactful over your working lifetime. The next thing probably is just reviewing your insurances, especially if your personal life and circumstances have changed. Many people don't realise the super and insurance implications around getting married, or if unfortunately that leads to separation and divorce, having children, or even buying a house. Consider the role of financial advice to map out a financial plan tailored to your personal circumstances to help you reach any goals that you've got for the future, for life after work. And really importantly, just checking in on these key elements at different points in your life to make sure that everything's still on track. Talk to your fund. They can always help you in all of these areas.
Well, I'd love to dig into that side of things a little bit more then for a moment then, Sarah, because I feel like, one of the areas of uncertainty that a lot of people have when it comes to their superannuation is around financial advice. So what role does financial advice play in super?
Look, I am a huge advocate for financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor myself, but I've worked around financial advisors for a large part of my career. And I've seen firsthand the real value and positive change they bring to people's lives. Most super funds will offer some form of advice. And without getting into the technicalities, there are simple general forms of advice, all the way to sort of more comprehensive whole of life personal advice offers. At the general advice end, you can access information about financial products. But if you want to talk about what is the best choice for your situation, then that starts to move into personal advice. A number of funds will offer personal advice about your super with them at no additional charge, and that is a great place to start your financial advice journey. For many people, it's more about knowing, how can I even access financial advice, and then trusting your fund to help guide you down the advice path that's right for you. You can receive financial advice from many sources, but I would advocate that you get it from a professional, accredited financial advisor who has obligations to always be acting in your best interest in the advice that they give. And while I could provide lots of statistics to you around that support the value of Australians receiving financial advice, and those statistics are both financial and emotional, that Australians, they get better retirement outcomes, they get high balances, but they also feel more confident about their future, and they almost have a sense of peace of mind as they are on that journey to retirement, knowing that they feel informed and confident about what is to come ahead. For many, with financial advice, it is actually about trying to take that first step What we find is that the members that have an advisor in their corner feel the retirement road ahead for them is sort of a shared experience, and they've got a trusted guide there to help them navigate a lot of the complexity that will come as you actually move into retirement, which is the entire purpose of superannuation.
I've mentioned before on the show that I guess I've become a much more engaged super member over the last 5 years or so. I'm very much a check-in every month type of guy now. I know full well that a lot of my mates who are, in their early and mid-30s are pretty disengaged, though, probably because retirement still seems like, and I guess it is, a long way off for them. So, Sarah, with this in mind, how can people, I guess, make super more relatable?
And look, I don't think your mates are alone. I think if we spoke to some psychologists, they would probably affirm that it is actually really challenging for people to envisage their future self. And so with something like superannuation and planning for retirement, we're trying to encourage people to think about their future self, and that future can be quite a way off, and that is actually quite challenging. But funds try to help you do that with a range of tools that are looking to model out the super you've got today into what sort of lifestyle that may afford for you in retirement, so that you can translate that back to what actions could I take today to change that outcome. And that could be the level of contribution you're making. It could be the ambition of what age you think you're going to retire at. It could be checking in on how comfortable you are, taking in on volatility around how your super is invested to achieve different growth levels. The reality is that retirement is deeply personal, and it's a process that really links to individuals' goals and objectives. And while super funds play a crucial role in this, for many, we're not the only way in which an individual will secure the financial future that they need for retirement. For example, there's absolutely a role for the age pension, especially as we continue to live longer. And of course, many people have assets outside of super. The main thing is that super funds have an intrinsic mandate to help members achieve a great retirement outcome. And part of how funds do that is by providing tools, resources, education, and financial advice on what that could look like. And this is why being super curious can really pay off, because it helps you form a better understanding and relationship with your super fund. In reality, super funds want to partner with you for life. They can support you through your working life and the accumulation of your super into retirement and living in retirement. And so that's why it's important that you get involved, be curious, and start caring about that relationship.
Well, I'm sure many of our listeners today will definitely be a bit more curious about everything from, unclaimed super to their insurance settings to, perhaps even making a concessional contribution or another type of contribution to their super. And I'm sure we could keep talking all day about the topic. It's one that, I think everyone knows I love, but we are rapidly running out of time, unfortunately. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us, for answering some of the questions that I know people often have with super. It's been great to get your insights, and it's been a real pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for your curiosity.
That's it for this episode of the Friends with Money podcast, but don't forget to jump on our website, moneymag.com.au, for your daily dose of financial news. We can go grab yourself a copy of the latest edition of Money Magazine in all good newsagents. As always, Friends with Money will be right back in your podcast feed next week. But until then, my name is Tom Watson. Goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Friends with Money podcast. For credible, independent, and easy to understand financial commentary, visit moneymag.com.au. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are general in nature, and further independent advice and research based on your personal circumstances should be sought before making an investment decision.